Bugatti didn't think that we were going to be able to separate this car in half.
Can't do that in a garage. There's just a few places in the world with the right equipment to be able to do that.
And put it back together.
Everything was coming together nicely, at least on the surface. We had managed to tackle multiple problems at once, and even got the car to a point where it could start, which already felt like a huge step forward. But the real question looming over everything was whether it could actually run properly and reach operating temperature without anything going wrong. That's the kind of test that reveals whether all the work so far has truly paid off, or if there are still hidden issues waiting to show themselves. Alongside that, there was still a big question mark hanging over the airbags, specifically whether the replacements we sourced were genuinely compatible or just looked the part. At a glance, they seemed similar, but appearances can be deceiving, especially when dealing with something as critical as safety components. Up to this point, the only repair we'd carried out on the car that felt relatively straightforward was the gearbox bracket. It was something we could weld and fix without too much drama. But moving forward, the difficulty level was rising fast, particularly because we didn't have direct support from the manufacturer. That meant every repair, every part, and every solution had to come from our own ingenuity. We were dealing with deployed airbags, structural chassis damage, and damaged radiators, all of which needed to be either repaired or recreated from scratch. It wasn't just about getting parts, it was about figuring out how to make them work safely and effectively. When it came to the chassis damage, Bob stepped in with confidence. From his perspective, this kind of repair wasn't anything unusual, and he approached it like many other high-end cars he'd worked on, explaining that the materials and structure were surprisingly similar to other luxury vehicles. His plan was methodical. Cut away the damaged sections, carefully peel back the metal, heat it to soften it without weakening it, and then rebuild the structure using fresh aluminum. What stood out was how calm he was about it, describing the process as simpler than many jobs he'd handled before. Even though it looked complex to anyone else, he saw it as a hollow structure that could be reshaped and rebuilt with the right approach. While Bob focused on rebuilding the structural components, attention shifted to the interior, which had taken a serious hit due to the airbag deployment. The dashboard had been torn open, the steering wheel damaged, and various trims compromised. Instead of just restoring it to factory condition, there was an opportunity to completely transform it. The entire interior was stripped out and handed over for a full redesign. What started as a standard black leather and Alcantara setup was about to become something far more unique, with bold color choices and custom patterns that would make it stand out like nothing else. The process of reworking the interior was intricate. The original leather was removed and used as a template to cut new material, ensuring everything would fit perfectly once reassembled. A custom pattern was designed digitally, then transferred onto the leather using a stencil and paint process that permanently embedded the design. It wasn't just about aesthetics. Even functional elements like the airbag sections had to be carefully engineered. Weak points had to be recreated in a way that allowed airbags to deploy correctly while remaining invisible during normal use. This required precise measurements, laser cutting, and a lot of testing to ensure the behavior matched the original design. When the finished interior was finally revealed, it was clear that the risk had paid off. The bold color scheme, including a striking combination of purple and white, completely transformed the look of the car. At first, it seemed like a gamble, but seeing it fully assembled made it obvious that it worked. It wasn't just different, it gave the car a completely new identity, while still retaining some of its original character through subtle details. Back in the workshop, the structural repairs were progressing steadily. The damaged section of the chassis was carefully cut away, preserving as much of the original material as possible. The goal was to retain critical mounting points while rebuilding everything around them. Using heat and careful shaping, the bent metal was brought back into alignment. New sections were fabricated piece by piece, forming a box-like structure that mirrored the original design. Each part was tacked into place first, allowing for adjustments before final welding. It was a slow, precise process, but the results were impressive. Once finished, the repaired section blended in so well that it was almost impossible to tell it had ever been damaged. With the structural work nearing completion, attention returned to the mechanical side, particularly the cooling system. The car's setup was incredibly complex, with multiple radiators and cooling circuits that all needed to function perfectly. Since the original radiators were too damaged to reuse, replacements had to be built from scratch. This involved sourcing compatible cores, fabricating mounting points, and essentially reverse engineering the entire system based on what remained of the originals. It was a mix of precision and educated guesswork, especially without having intact reference parts. Fitting the newly built radiators was a challenge in itself. Some aligned well, while others needed adjustments to brackets and mounting points. There were moments of doubt, especially when it became clear that certain pieces had been assembled slightly incorrectly. Still, the overall progress was encouraging. Everything was gradually coming together, and it finally reached the stage where the system could be tested. Before adding coolant, the system needed to be pressure tested to ensure there were no leaks. This was a critical moment, because a failure here would mean going back and reworking parts of the system. As pressure was applied, there was an immediate sense that something wasn't right. A faint hissing sound revealed that air was escaping somewhere. After a bit of searching, the source of the leak was found in one of the newly built radiators. It was a frustrating setback, especially given how close everything was to being complete. Despite that, it wasn't a total failure. The progress made up to that point was significant. The interior was nearly finished, the structural repairs were solid, and most of the cooling system was functioning as intended. The leak was just one more problem to solve, and with the experience gained from everything else, it felt manageable. The plan was simple: fix the issue, refine the setup, and come back stronger for the next attempt. Even though the goal of getting the car to run at full temperature wasn't achieved this time, the project had moved forward in a big way. Each challenge had pushed the limits of what was possible without manufacturer support, and each solution proved that with the right skills and determination, even the most complex problems